Hello, 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 fellow Whittier neighbors and community members. My name is Cindy Hovey, and I have lived in the Whittier neighborhood for about 5 years as a renter. I was elected to serve on the board in 2018, and I am now honored to be the current chair of the Whittier Alliance board.
Hi, and I'm Abby Speller. I was elected to the board in 2019, and we're so glad you're here to learn more about the Whittier Alliance Bylaw Revision Project. Thank you for joining us, and we will be your guides during this presentation.
So we have a lot to cover today. So make sure you have some water and have some snacks. Bylaws aren't necessarily the most exciting thing, but they are important. Here's everything we'll go through. We'll briefly discuss what is the Whittier Alliance, and what the heck are bylaws? Why are we proposing changes? What the process has been up to this point? And what are those changes and the reasons we are proposing them?
And most importantly, how you can make sure your voice in your neighborhood is heard by voting on these changes.
It's definitely the most important part. You're right, Abby. So what is the Whittier Alliance? First, it's important to know the Whittier neighborhood is geographically located between Lake Street to the south, Franklin Avenue to the north, and Lindale Avenue to the west, and 35 West to the east.
That's right, and the Whittier Alliance is the official neighborhood organization of this neighborhood. The Whittier Alliance engages residents, businesses, nonprofits, and property owners in planning and implementing initiatives to influence housing issues and solutions, build cross-cultural understanding, increase civic engagement, support our small business community, and enhance overall quality of life in the Whittier neighborhood. All of this with a focus on the most vulnerable and marginalized by systems of oppression within our society.
The Whittier Alliance is made up of staff. Shout out to the amazing Kaylee, Fartoon, and Marcus, the neighborhood elected board of directors, and most importantly, the membership. You. If you are a resident, a renter or owner of a condo or house, a business, restaurant, or property owner in Whittier, the Whittier Alliance is your neighborhood organization, and you are an important member of this neighborhood and the organization. And you have a say in what this organization prioritizes and how it operates.
Which leads us to what the heck are bylaws anyways, and why should we care? Bylaws are the rules that govern what an organization is able to do and the ways in which they can do it. Bylaws are basically a roadmap for decision making and a promise to which you, our members, can hold us, staff and volunteer board, accountable.
Bylaws define who is a member of the organization, who has the ability to vote for board members to represent them and the issues that impact them, and who is able to run to be on the board to shape the work of the organization. Bylaws decide who has a seat at the table. They matter because they determine who has access to participation and decision making.
Some aspects of our current bylaws are making it harder for us to be the best neighborhood organization we can be. In the rest of this presentation, we will go through each of the changes we're proposing and explain what would change and why we believe it's the right thing to do. In general, we've proposed changes to make participating in the organization more accessible and to make activities of the organization more equitable for everyone.
Additionally, 2020 has demanded creativity in how we hold meetings, new ways of operating, and constant flexibility to navigate the unknown. So some of the proposed changes you'll see are a direct reflection of the changing realities of our world and technology.
As we move through the overview of changes and the reasoning for them, you will see that they support and are informed by the 4 pillars of the Whittier Alliance's current strategic plan.
My favorite, community engagement. Inspire and equip the Whittier community to be good stewards of the neighborhood and to make the changes they'd like to see.
Next up, for business institutions and organizations, to support the vibrant and distinctive mix of Whittier businesses, institutions, and other organizations.
Housing, protect and expand the variety of housing options in Whittier for people at every stage of life and economic condition.
And last but not least, organizational sustainability, develop the institutional power necessary to achieve our priorities, and reliably serve the neighborhood for another 40 years to come.
One last thing before we jump into the proposed changes and the nitty-gritty fun time bylaws. For transparency, we want you to know what the process up to this point has included. On this slide and the next, you can see a timeline of that process. This timeline is available in a document on the special meeting webpage as well. The important thing to know is that Abby and I are certainly not the only two minds and voices that have contributed to this project. There has been a bylaws task force of 7 members of the Whittier Alliance board leading the process from the beginning to end. Whew, thank you to every member of that task force for the numerous hours and meetings that have gone into this work. The full board has also discussed and workshopped and approved these changes during at least 4 board meetings, all open to the public. And the Whittier Alliance facilitated a community conversation around the biggest themes in the proposed changes. During this meeting, there was resounding support and excitement from the community. We've also consulted with a lawyer on 3 occasions to ensure our proposals are increasing accessibility, remaining compliant to city and state regulations, and supporting the organization's sustainability. A lot has gone into this to get us to this point, and we are very excited to share it with you, and again, are very grateful that you are here to learn about it. So let's get started.
This presentation will explain the themes and purpose behind every change. And if you're interested in the exact wording, we recommend you open the proposed changes rationale document, linked on the same webpage you found this video, to follow along with this presentation.
And that link is whittieralliance.org/special-meeting. You'll also find a lot more information about bylaws and the special meeting there. So check that site out. The first change that we are proposing is that throughout the bylaws, all instances of gendered pronouns, he, she, his, and her, are replaced with ungendered pronouns, they and theirs. This is to increase inclusivity of the document and to be more welcoming of non-binary neighbors.
The next change is the reference to the Whittier Alliance as the corporation in the bylaws, and replacing that with the organization, WA, or the Whittier Alliance. And this is in order to better reflect the nature, purpose, and the work of the Whittier Alliance.
Number 3, membership age. We're proposing to lower the minimum age of which someone would be eligible to be a voting member of the Whittier Alliance from 18 to 15. This is to encourage youth and young adult participation. We believe that if you're able to live and work in the neighborhood, that your voice matters, and young people's voices do matter, and we want them to be part of our neighborhood organization. For legal purposes and fiduciary responsibility to serve as a board member, you will still have to be 18 years or older.
The next change is activating membership. So we're removing the process of activating membership for eligible members. Members are either eligible to vote or they aren't. There is no longer the extra activation step. Activating membership seems to not serve any useful purpose, and it's difficult for staff to track. So establishing your membership already establishes your voting rights. The extra step of activation is unnecessary barrier to participation.
Knocking down barriers. Sorry, that was pretty cheesy. And membership eligibility. Speaking of barriers and removing more of them, this change expands the options for providing membership eligibility and clarifies how to prove eligibility of business members. So currently our bylaws require members to use a photo ID to prove eligibility. While it does matter to prove that you are part of the Whittier neighborhood, since this organization serves a specific geographical area, we do not believe it should be more difficult to participate in neighborhood business than federal and state elections. This change makes it easier for renters, students, undocumented folks, and others to prove their residency and vote at the Whittier Alliance meetings. It also is against state nonprofit laws to require photo IDs, and it goes against the City of Minneapolis guidance. The acceptable proofs of residency that we are proposing would include a bill, account, or start of service statement dated within the past 30 days. That could be a utility bill, phone bill, TV, or internet. An ID card showing a name and Whittier address, any form of ID. Government, academic, residential, with or without a photo. Current residential lease or rent agreement, including subleases with a term that covers the date of voting, also would be allowed. Then current student housing documentation. And also we are proposing that we expand to allow vouching. So if you have not established your voting eligibility and you do not have any of the listed documents above, you would be able to be accompanied to a Whittier meeting or to the Whittier Alliance office by a neighbor who can vouch for your address. And then also any other forms that are allowed by the Minnesota Secretary of State election guidelines would be allowed. So we're really believing in making sure that anyone who is part of the Whittier neighborhood is able to participate and that we are knocking down those barriers. I did it again, I apologize.
Thanks, Cindy. The next change has to do with the membership list. A membership list will still be kept, but the change will not require members who have proven their voting eligibility to re-verify it at every meeting with the photo ID. This was an extra barrier to participation for people who do not have photo IDs. According to city guidelines and state nonprofit laws, if an organization member is on a current member list, they are eligible to vote, and as Cindy just shared, neighborhood organizations are required by law to accept non-photo ID methods of establishing residency.
Voting rights. The changes on this section streamlines participation for different member types and removes the existing separation of the business association from the rest of the Whittier Alliance. So essentially, all Whittier Alliance members would be able to vote on all Whittier Alliance business committees, general membership meetings, etc. We believe that once you are a member of the Whittier Alliance, you should be able to take part in all business and happenings of the Whittier Alliance. Residents, businesses, and properties all weave together to form a neighborhood and influence one another. And all members have the same rights.
Number 8, acting committee meetings. This change sets an expectation for a minimum number of meetings for each acting committee, but allows for more flexibility in what kind of event meets these requirements. It allows for different committees to be more flexible in how they carry out their purposes. For example, a committee might have 4 large events per year to bring the community together, or it might meet every month to address ongoing neighborhood concerns with a more focused group.
Annual meeting, number 9. This section has a few very important changes that support flexibility and increase participation, inclusion, and equity in the Whittier Alliance voting procedures. So the City of Minneapolis funding contracts will be requiring neighborhood organizations to accept nominations from the floor. This proposed bylaw process allows for nominations from the floor while still having a process to confirm eligibility and qualifications. This increases accessibility and participation while maintaining integrity and protecting the organization from bad actors. Additionally, within these proposed changes, rather than the board elections of membership business being voted on only at the meeting, the proposed change will extend the voting period to at least 7 days following the annual meeting, and allows for use of online and in-person at the office voting. Of course, as long as member eligibility is established. Allowing for voting options outside of the meeting increases accessibility and participation. Point blank. The annual meeting serves to inform members and establish what members are voting on, and it should not limit voters to only those who can attend. Another change in this section is that resident directors and business representative property owner directors will be elected all at the annual meeting. Again, this is shifting with the member voting rights, where every member can vote on everything, and furthering the integration of the business association into the acting committee model. Whew, that was a mouthful. This is again about accessibility and inclusion.
So the same voting procedure as Cindy just explained for the annual meeting is proposed to be used at all special meetings too. Since a special meeting requires the same level of attendance and notification as the annual meeting, the same voting procedure should be used to increase accessibility and participation of the membership.
Location and form of member meetings. This change is small yet important, but it allows for meetings to occur in person and or through remote participation. So this allows for flexibility as well as more accessibility.
The Whittier Alliance is required by law to give 10 to 30 days notice of any membership meetings. As the current bylaw is written, it could be interpreted that providing notice of meetings can happen only within 15 to 30 days of a meeting. The proposed change clarifies the requirement while explaining that more notice and outreach is encouraged and provides guidance.
Number 13, board member duties. The changes here are simply updates that expand upon the duties and powers of the board member. New language provides a better explanation of the role of board directors and outlines expectations more completely in accordance with Minnesota statutes and federal laws.
Board qualifications. So this change makes participation in serving on the board more accessible, especially for newer members, renters, which are 86% of the residents living in Whittier, or longtime residents, business owners who are finding out about the Whittier Alliance. To be an eligible director candidate, you still must have some engagement with Whittier Alliance to protect against abuse and to ensure knowledge of the organization. Our current bylaws require a candidate to be an eligible voting member for at least 6 months prior to the date of application or appointment and be able to demonstrate current and ongoing participation with the organization. And lastly, you need to be able to demonstrate attendance at Whittier Alliance sponsored meetings or task forces within the current year, which would be effectively 3 to 4 months before the typical annual meeting date. The proposed changes will require a candidate to meet all the eligibility requirements for membership and be able to demonstrate attendance at Whittier Alliance sponsored events, meetings, or task forces, or an individual meeting with Whittier Alliance staff or a board member within the 12 months before the annual meeting. The proposed bylaw will still require a candidate to not have taken any adverse action to the organization or showing implied malice toward the organization. There is an addition stating that exercising the right to speak critically about the organization or its need to improve or following a grievance procedure is not considered malice. Listing what malice is not provides more clarity and guidance for Whittier Alliance Board of Directors while preventing abuse of power and protecting the Whittier Alliance members' rights.
Board composition. 15 at-large directors, the chairs of all acting committees, and then 4 representatives from the business association. Those are currently the board seats that exist. We're proposing to shift from that to 12 resident directors, 3 business representatives / property owner directors, and then a seat on the board for all the chairs of all active committees. The current maximum size of a board of the board is 23 members, which is just unwieldy for planning meetings and has led to a high number of vacancies. As with earlier changes in the business association, the new board composition better integrates the business association into the larger board. With the changes of a lower number of seats with the board, as well as the changes to the nomination committee coming up in a couple slides, this will help to maintain a full and active board. So We believe that if a individual who owns property in Whittier but does not live in Whittier, that they are engaging in business-like operations. So a property owner who is also a resident in Whittier could choose to run for a 3-year resident director seat or a 1-year business representative / property owner director seat.
So the next change, board elections and terms. This updates aspects of board member application and election processes, including removing the in-person requirement for application, allowing for nominations from the floor, and reflecting the reworked nominations committee role, which will be on the next slide. The proposed changes increase accessibility while maintaining eligibility standards, and requiring in-person submission can be a barrier for someone who's not able to come to the Whittier Alliance office during business hours. And the new changes also allow for a potential board candidate to be nominated on the day of a meeting as long as they can demonstrate that they meet eligibility requirements.
And as Abby mentioned, the role of the nominations committee, we have reworked and are proposing that it specifically addresses the filling of vacancies. It was identified during the effort to fill vacancies that the existing bylaws really don't provide guidance and they could be subjectively implemented. We want to ensure filling board seats is accessible and allows for transparency. And this will allow us to maintain eligibility standards while doing that.
The next change, removal and absences. This expands upon the process for removal of board members and narrows the circumstances under which a board member can be automatically removed. The goal was to increase flexibility of attendance requirements to account for non-board meeting volunteer hours. The current bylaws provide very little flexibility to board members whose work or life circumstances may cause them to be absent from board meetings, but are still so active in our neighborhood and valuable members of the organization. Allowing board members to excuse some board meeting absences by demonstrating their time commitment in other ways will make this serving on the board more accessible to those with busy and unpredictable schedules.
Should I do it? Knocking down barriers. We are getting there. We are almost done. Thank you for making it this far in this presentation. Change 19, the board meetings and voting. The proposed additions in this section are clearly stating virtual and phone participation in board meetings, as well as written action and e-votes is allowed. So this means that the duties of the board can be maintained when meeting in person is not possible or accessible, otherwise known as 2020.
Interim chair appointment. This allows an outgoing board chair that is not reelected to appoint an interim board chair to serve until the first meeting of a newly elected board, at which a new board chair will be elected. This will mean that organization, staff, board, and members have support and leadership during times of transition.
Change 21, officers and roles. So remember, the Whittier Alliance board is made up of community elected volunteer directors. Together, the board nominates and elects officers to take on leadership roles for the board. So this is the chair, vice chair, treasurer, and secretary. Currently, our bylaws have a long list of these officers' duties. This adds unnecessary length to the bylaws and limits what a board can ask of or require of a given role depending on the board and the organization's needs. So we can keep these role descriptions in procedural documents, allowing them to be fine-tuned by any given board and at any different time of the organization's history and specific needs.
Acting committees, super important. This clarifies the process for forming acting committees and the role of committee members and committee chairs. In the current bylaws, the process for forming an acting committee is unclear. The proposed change clarifies that process and allows for more flexibility in the ways that the different acting committees conduct their business.
Beautiful. And for those of you who aren't aware, our current acting committees are our Housing Issues Committee, our Community Issues Committee, and our Business Association. And we've spoken about just kind of the integration of business association more into the acting committee model. throughout this. Next change is accessory committees and task force. So we are proposing that we remove the another long list, adding unnecessary length in our bylaws, and leave just a definition and general description of what the purpose of these committees and task forces can be, so that they can be formed if they are deemed needed. All right, we are on to our last proposed change, and in my opinion, the most important addition to our bylaws.
This change expands upon the existing non-discrimination policy. In addition to expanding on the protected classes against which the Alliance will not discriminate, the proposed changes hold the organization to a stronger commitment to equity and anti-racism. The Whittier Alliance strives to be inclusive in all its activities of all persons. All chairs, facilitators, and participants of Whittier Alliance meetings will prioritize the voices of historically underrepresented people, populations, and/or communities. We will not promote or tolerate racist, sexist, xenophobic, misogynistic, homophobic, transphobic, and other violent comments or language. We will seek to teach all members anti-racist, equity-driven, and inclusive approaches to community and neighborhood work in Whittier.
Whew, that was a lot of info. A lot of info and bylaws information at that. So thank you for bearing with us, and thank you for joining us to learn more about this process. Now comes the important part of how you can cast your vote for the new proposed bylaws. All the information I am about to go through is also listed on the webpage for the special meeting. So whittieralliance.org/special-meeting. The voting period will open during the special meeting on Thursday, January 14th, 2020, and it will remain open for 7 days, closing at midnight on January 21, 2020. Ooh, not 2020, 2021, because it's a new year. January 1st is when 2021 begins. So don't travel in time backwards to attend this meeting. It will be held in the year 2021, January 14th. You have a few options for voting. Attend that virtual meeting and cast your vote during that meeting, or vote online. And you can find that option again at whittieralliance.org/special-meeting. Or you can set up a time to vote in person at the Whittier Alliance office during that voting period. And you can contact the office at info@whittieralliance.org or call 612-871-7756.
So you must establish or confirm your eligibility to vote in order for your vote to be counted. We are still operating with the current bylaws, so here is what you must provide. A valid photo ID listing your Whittier address, or a valid photo ID plus a document listing your name and Whittier address. Acceptable documents include utility bills, lease agreements, payroll statements, or bank statements. And if you plan to vote during the special meeting, please send these documents as pictures or email attachments to info@whittieralliance.org or in person by appointment prior to the meeting by calling 612-871-7756. If you're voting online, there's a portion of the voting that asks you to upload a picture of your photo ID and proof of address. And if you plan to vote at the Whittier Alliance office during the voting period, be sure to bring your photo ID and proof of address with you. Reminder, our proposed bylaw changes include additions to change these requirements to increase accessibility and your participation. If you're unable to vote under the current bylaws, talk to your neighbors about the proposed changes.
Yes, if you feel those are restrictive, please vote. And again, a reminder that that special meeting will be held on Thursday, January 14th, 2021. Make sure you save the date. Not only will you have a chance to ask questions about proposed bylaw changes and cast your vote. You will hear about Whittier Alliance's recent work and enjoy artists' performances from the neighborhood. Again, Thursday, January 14th, 2021 at 6:30 to 8 p.m. You can find all information for joining that meeting by visiting whittieralliance.org/special-meeting.
Thank you all for joining us for this presentation. If you have any questions on the bylaw changes, the special meeting, or how to vote, please contact the Whittier Alliance staff. And again, we just thank you so much for being a part of our neighborhood and helping the Whittier Alliance become a more equitable and inclusive organization.